What's going on YouTube? Chronos here, and welcome back to another PSO2 video. So today we're going to talk about a concept that I've tried to keep with me when it comes to any game really. And I mean, it's not something I personally came up with, but I feel like people have their own versions of. Essentially, it's a concept called price per power. More or less, it's how much you're investing, whether it be resources, whether it be money or time, for gains of whatever character you're playing in whatever game it happens to be. This concept usually tends to get used a lot in like mobile games, where people are optimizing their limited resources, limited energy. For those of you guys out there playing Genshin, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Excuse me, to increase their character's overall power to get further into a game. Now, with PSO2 currently, we have an accelerated timeline that we're getting content in for the global servers. And the question tends to come up a lot, whether it be in one of my videos in the comments or whether it be on live on stream, is it worth for me to upgrade from such and such gear or such and such amount? In reality, it's kind of a loaded question, right? Because it really depends on where your gear is currently, what you're trying to get, and where you're trying to go. A concept, unfortunately, that's lost in a lot of games nowadays from past MMOs is best in slot, where you effectively almost beat the game, at least for a short period of time. You get the best gear, the best loot, the best setups, and then you're pretty much good to go until the new content comes out, and then you pretty much repeat the system all over again. Well, PSO2, not only is that not really that big of a concept, we talked about best in slot in a much earlier video, why that doesn't really apply to PSO2 the same way, but also we're getting content so fast that you really don't stay best in slot, quote unquote, for very long. So it tends to pop up a lot. Is like, was this even worth it? Why bother upgrading? So on and so forth. And I can understand that sentiment from a lot of people. However, with its accelerated timeline of events that we get, the game also does a fantastic job of just giving us the resources we need to keep caught up. Certain upgrades are worth and others aren't. And when it boils right down to it, we've had everything we've needed to get everything we want to get. We can stay up to date on weapons, on units, on everything in a fairly inexpensive manner, whether it be drop rates from doing current content. If you're unlucky, a lot of times what ends up happening are those drop rates are buffed for certain events, or in some cases they're even added into vendors for you to be able to get from currency that we have dropping all over the game. So staying up to date is really not that difficult to do. Now, it does depend on whether or not it's worth staying up to date in what you are currently doing in the game. What content are you completing? Are you hanging out in the lobby with fashion? Are you just doing emergency quests whenever they pop up? I guess they're called urgent quests, right? Are you just doing urgent quests whenever they pop up with groups of friends? Or are you pushing yourself into solo content? Maybe jumping into Endless, where you're trying to get a high score in Endless and see how far you can push yourself. Learning the stages, much like I've been doing on stream, and failing at them. In those situations, you have to decide what kind of content you're going to be getting into and how you want to push your character. And sometimes maybe your content is you just like making tons and tons of money and you like showing off really awesome gear. If that's your game, then hey, go for it. But the game does give you the tools you need to be able to do these sorts of things. So what we're going to talk about today is what you're really gaining, what your gains actually are, whether or not you should jump into everything. What really sparked this conversation or this thought or this topic was my unit video yesterday. I mentioned it in passing, but I talked about Clesis units and how I personally believe they're some of the best units to pick up right now, purely due to the fact that they have a very good future involved in them. But not only just that, but they're dirt cheap. They're really easy to get a hold of, and it's a ton of power for your character. Now, this is going to be one of those situations where it's more of a do as I say, not as I do situation. As if you guys ever watch my stream, you know tons of those situations. Do as I say, not as I do. I personally didn't go that route. Because I had the offset units available to me, I had one in the back unit, and I had an Ivalda leg unit. All I had to do is pick up an arm unit fairly cheap the day these became sellable. That was actually about 3-4 mil. I bought it off of one of my alliance mates, but the price was around 3 to 4 mil when I purchased it, and it went along with this back unit. Now, one thing that people are looking at with these units a lot, and I mentioned it in my previous video, were that they upgrade into 13 stars later on down the road. Now, that did get mentioned in the comments. People were talking about, well, you know, we don't know for sure if they're going to upgrade into 13 stars. To be honest, it is pretty much almost guaranteed, right? We know for a fact these units will upgrade just because we've had them over on JP. Now, we weren't sure about the invade units, But over on JP, the 12-star units are now not only are they sellable, but they also do upgrade into the 13-star variants. And we do have the same, more or less the same patches that JP has. And granted, it's not all the same content, but the way the units work, everything along those lines, they're more or less the same stuff. You can actually match unit for unit over on JP and over on Global. All they do is change a few names. So we know these will upgrade into 13 stars. The question is when, and will it be early enough for us to make use of? Currently over on JP, these are the 4th best units in the entire game as a 13-star unit. That's why they're so expensive now over on Global. People have figured that out. They're like, I'm picking up these units and I'm holding on to them. Some people are still farming like crazy for these units, right? But that's just it. 4th best. When they came out and they were able to upgrade into 13 stars, they were the best. And they stayed the best for a decent amount of time. They hiked up a lot of the prices, stayed the best for a decent amount of time. But then something came out better. 3 times over. And keep in mind, we have an accelerated life cycle for our game at the moment. So there's a good chance that these won't be the best for a long period of time. Not even close to as long as they were over on JP. And that might be okay for you, right? You might be like, look, I'm looking at how much these units actually provide me. I'm cool with that moving forward. And more power to you. I'm not against that mindset at all. I tell people all the time, if you have a unit set up and you're sitting pretty comfortably, there's no reason for you to have to push yourself even further to gain minimal amounts of gains, right? And I looked at my unit setup and I thought to myself, could this be better? How much better could it really be? Because I looked at certain units and I was like, well, these are fairly inexpensive and they seem pretty strong. When I say certain units, I'm actually going to go over the exact units that we went over on the video. Let's see if I can, do I happen to have them? Part of the reason I'm showing this in game is because of how cheap these units actually have been. So yeah, you can see the offset units, 10 mil for the arm, kind of crazy. Jupiter Tellus, very expensive. Back unit, 10 mil, so that's about 20 mil for some power, right? And I do have some numbers here that I've crunched off on the side for myself. So the arm and the back unit for offset units at the moment are going to provide you 70 HP, 5 PP per unit. On top of that, you also have a set bonus that's going to give you 50 more HP, 20 PP, and 80 all attack. So together, it's a fairly strong unit setup, right? But if you take them and you separate them apart, you can look at their weight per unit. And their weight per unit is going to run you roughly 95 HP, 15 PP, and 40 all attack. Where you can look at something like Clesis. Currently, Clesis is going to run you 90 HP, 10 PP, and 40 all attack. Well, when you look at it from that perspective, you can see that the Off-Zeros units are only giving you an extra 5 HP and 5 PP. Same amount of all attack. Mostly the same stats. Granted, 5 PP is a little bit more than anything else, but the biggest thing is you want to look at the prices. Actually, I don't even think they're on here, are they? Well, here's Clesis. Clesis is selling really, really expensive because you have to upgrade certain units into them, right? But let me double check and see if I have the units myself. I think I saved. If I would have saved them, they'd be here. Yes, okay. So Lavalda units, if we check the prices on these, they're 49 mil or 49k for the base form of this. Granted, at base form, it's only 60 HP, I believe. I want to say 9 PP. I'm not sure off the top of my head. We can just check the wiki really quick. Yes, I always have the wiki open for these exact reasons. If you've ever been on one of my streams, you know I pop in the wiki all the time just to look at stuff and kind of compare when people ask questions. So it's not a bad idea to have this bookmarked at all times. Yeah, so 60, it's still 10 PP and it's 25 all attack. It's not fantastic, but it's not terrible, right? And if you're getting into your units, you really are kind of working on grinding some stuff. All you have to do is grind Buster Quest. You do one free field, so you do one free match and 2 main matches. You can do 2 main matches and you can do 2 free matches and 4 main matches. Just depends on how you decide you want to set it up for yourself. If you're just worried about badges, I believe just doing the free matches are the best bet, but you can level up other classes, farm gear for other things you might need, or break everything down and sell the mats, or hoard up the mats for whenever Atlas EX inevitably comes out and people aren't prepared for it, and you can make a killing off of people selling those mats on the market. Either way, very inexpensive, not very difficult to upgrade. Fairly easy to upgrade. It's 100 stones over at Zig, and you're good to go from there. So these units are really, really cheap, and they're really, really strong. Like when you look at it from that perspective, it's kind of crazy when you think about Austere and how expensive they are. And the cool part about these units are they're strong on their own. You don't need a set bonus to get this power. Austere has to have the back of the army. And I say Austere, I'm sorry, it's Offzeros or whatever you want to call it. But the Offzeteros, but the Offset units require the set bonus for them to be that powerful. Now, not a terrible thing, but it does depend on a few situations, things that we can't really quantify for just yet. I mentioned it in the past video, but one of the things that makes 13-star units so great are the S-grade augment slots. So not only we talked about, how these units are fairly inexpensive compared to our Off-Zeros counterparts, and how they're not that big a difference in power, but if we also keep in mind the 13-star variant, this is one of the first 13-star units to actually become available. You could upgrade these Clesis units into Chevelle units. And when you upgrade them into Chevelle units, the S-grade augment pops up. It's an S-grade augment slot. It's an S6. And for those of you guys who have played over on JP, you know that the S6 slot is very important to a lot of classes. However, it wasn't available immediately. At first, we only had S-grade augments that were just, for lack of a better term, they were just stats. Just much like regular augments, they were just stats themselves. I think it was like HP, main stat, and PP between back, arm, and legs is what we started out with originally. We had a couple of interesting ones, some that reduced damage taken, so on and so forth, but it was mostly just that. They weren't available immediately. A little bit later on down the line, we had some more 13 stars pop up, and then we also had new S-grade augment abilities available. So you fall into two specific situations. You have the Clesis upgrading to Chevelle, which happens fairly early, but the S-grade augments may not be available that we actually want to upgrade into that 13-star for, right? So we are getting more statage out of upgrading into a 13-star, but keep in mind, it's a minimal amount of statage that you're actually gaining. You don't need to rush into that 13-star variant. There may be a 12-star that might be stronger for a while. For example, Lightstream units, when those come around, are fairly strong units. I believe they're 100 HP, I want to say 15 PP and 50 all attack, if not 60, something along those lines. I don't remember off the top of my head, but they are fairly strong units that are available to you. And a lot of players I know didn't upgrade into 13-star units until they either did an augment transfer pass system to upgrade their units itself, or until there was an S-grade augment that they really wanted for their class. Classes like Bouncer or Hunter that have S-grade augments that really, really mean a lot to them because they come from weapon effects that we aren't using anymore. And they really change up the way the class plays. So it's super, super important to keep in mind that, yes, you will be able to upgrade these first to 13-star, but that may not mean anything. It might just mean a little bit more stat gain. And you have to keep in mind, what is that actually getting you? On the flip side, these might end up being a bit better, but how much more power are you really gaining? And overall, is it worth the spending that amount of money? If we're looking at it right now and you had either one of these units, you'd be spending 20 mil. So if you were to come to my stream and say, hey, should I buy the offset units? They are, I guess, quote, best in slot units, right? Shouldn't I get them? I'd tell you no. Unless you happen to get one of these as a drop and someone is selling the other one fairly inexpensive, I wouldn't recommend anyone purchase these units. They're 10 mil a piece. Not when you have units like these that are, I hate to call them the budget option because they're just so strong, but when they're legitimately the budget option, you end up spending a lot less money. And one thing you find out is if you spend less money on the unit, you can spend more money on the augmentation. And that's where a lot of your power comes from when it comes down to your units, where you get a lot of power from weapons, from just their base stats and their potentials. The augmentations are just kind of like the cherry on top. For most weapons, not everything. Certain weapons require certain things, but most of the time augmentations are cherry on top when it comes to a weapon, or I'd say the icing on the cake. Units, it's a little bit reversed. It's kind of, in some cases, a bit of half and half. Sometimes it's a little bit heavier related towards the augmentations. It just depends on the unit you're going for and what you're doing. So you really want to think about these things when you're looking at your different choices. Right now, if you were to ask me what the best unit in the entire game was right now, if we're looking at price per power, it is Clesis by far. It is not even a contest. It is insanely powerful. You're looking at things like Whaleboard that is just flat out a nerf compared to Clesis. It's just 40 less HP. That's it. Now, granted, you could buy this whaler board. Probably, I'd imagine you probably buy them pretty inexpensively. I haven't looked recently, so let's take a look. Yeah, they're fairly inexpensive. So, like, let's say you didn't need the extra HP, you didn't have the actual what is it called? You didn't have the upgrade items for this Clesis. Fairly inexpensive choice to pick up. However, doesn't go into anything. It's just a 12-star. But you know, Chrono, you just said that 12 going into a 13-star is not that important. You're absolutely right. It isn't that important. But what I'm saying is it's not that important to rush. Take your time, get to what you need. Yes, our scale is accelerated. However, you're going to waste money and you're going to waste resources pushing yourself into new gear consistently faster than you absolutely need to. If you were to tell me you had a 6-slot setup that was using something like Circuit Union, and that 6-slot setup was pretty powerful, I would tell you to stick with them. Hold on to them until 13-star units come out. Don't worry about swapping them up, because you're probably perfectly fine. Another thing to keep in mind is, are you actually having trouble with content? Are you getting one-shot? Are you dying? Are you unable to complete DPS checks because you can't do enough damage? Are bosses becoming too difficult because you can't do enough damage? And your goal is to, like, say, carry a group, right? When I go into pugs, I really don't care who goes with us, because a lot of times I'm trying to do solo content anyway. So in my mindset, I want to be able to solo the boss, so it doesn't matter who comes along with us. I should be able to do enough damage regardless. So if you're like that, then maybe you want to upgrade your gear because you want to do as much damage as you possibly can. But you also want to keep in mind that you are burning your resources and what's available to you. Sometimes it's not worth spending 20 mil to get almost, I would say, less than 1% extra in power. It's kind of crazy. Also, I didn't touch on it immediately, but I did do a little bit of math. I was kind of curious if you guys are curious of this process itself, but I was looking at Offceros, and the arm and the back unit mixed with a Clesis leg is pretty powerful, right? You're getting about 280 HP, 40 PP, and 120 melee power. However, if you trade that, so say you trade 100 HP away, trade about 3 PP away, you can gain an extra 45 melee power, which, you think about it, ain't that much. So it's kind of weird, right? It depends on where you currently are in the game, what you have available to you, and what you can do with it. If you have Offceros already, if they're already augmented and you're good to go, and your concern is that, hey, I want to be able to use S-grade augments when they're available, at the time that they actually come up and they matter to you, you might be good to go and you might be able to upgrade these weapons. On the flip side, if you don't have Offceros already, you haven't been farming a ton of Baron Blossom, and you have access to Clesis because you've been doing Buster quests because you're leveling, you have the added benefit of being able to upgrade into a 13-star unit fairly early on in the actual life cycle of episode 6. So hopefully that provides a bit more information. I know a lot of people had questions about this sort of thing. This is a little bit, it's like a longer video, but this does kind of beat this concept into the head a little bit. I want to make sure people understand that when we do offer ideas of units, of weapons, of all these things that I cover, the mindset is take your perspective, not just what I'm showing you. The whole idea is to provide you information so you can make an informed decision. You decide on how you want to take your progression. And it always depends on the individual, the player. It doesn't fit everyone. There's no one size fits all for like 99.9% of PSO2. Some things are just that good. But anyway, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to toss them in the comments below. A like on the video is always appreciated and absolves you of half of your ad block guilt. The other half is absolved by subscribing. Both are completely free and they do help me out a ton. You always click on the bell icon if you want to be notified of the videos when they pop up, or if you want to be notified of our community posts where I do post about things that are going on with me or whenever the streams are going live. And apparently that's been helping people actually get over to the stream, so I'm going to continue to do that, even though I felt like I was spamming you guys for a little bit. If that's not your thing, you can always hop over onto Discord, where we have a community of people that is basically its own community, essentially. Not always related to PSO2, there's tons of other stuff going on in there, so you guys are more than welcome to join. And if you want to just follow me on social media, you can always pop over to Twitter and follow me there, where I post about the stream, as well as other random tidbits of my life. Thanks so much for watching, you guys, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, and peace out.